My family hijacked my vacation plans for my golden sister and her kids. But what they didn't know was that I wasn't about to let them get away with it. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Rachel Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a nurse. I've spent most of my adult life working long shifts, covering holidays, and taking on extra hours just to save enough money to do something for myself. I've always dreamed of a trip to Hawaii, the kind of trip where I could actually breathe for once, without patients calling my name, without anyone depending on me. Just the sound of the waves, the sun on my skin, and silence. After years of saving, I finally booked it. My own hotel room, my own flights, everything set up and fully paid with my own hard-earned money. But the moment I mentioned my vacation to my family, the trouble started. I should have known better. You see, my parents have always had a clear favorite, my younger sister, Emily. She's 29, married, and has 2 kids. She's the golden child, the one who can do no wrong. When she got married, my parents paid for the whole wedding. When she had her first baby, they practically moved in with her to help. When I achieved something, a pat on the back, maybe. But more often, I was told, well, you don't have a family to take care of, so it's easier for you. Growing up, it was always the same story. Emily got the praise, the support, the love, and I got the responsibilities. I was the one expected to babysit, to help pay for things when Emily and her husband couldn't afford them, to show up when no one else would. And if I ever dared to say no, suddenly I was selfish, ungrateful, or forgetting what family means. So when I told them about my Hawaii trip, I expected some jealousy, maybe a snide remark. What I didn't expect was how fast they would swoop in to take it from me. My mom's first words weren't, "That's wonderful," or "You deserve it." Instead, she said, "Oh, wouldn't it be nice if Emily and the kids could go too? They need a break so badly." My dad chimed in, nodding, saying, "Yeah, Rachel, you should think about inviting them. Family vacations are so much better." Emily sat there with that sweet smile she uses when she's about to get her way. I mean, Hawaii would be amazing for the kids. They've never even seen the ocean. It's kind of selfish to keep something like that to yourself, don't you think? That was the moment my stomach dropped. I knew that tone, that look. She wasn't asking, she was telling me, and my parents were already on her side. I tried to laugh it off, telling them this was something I planned just for me, but they didn't care. They made me out to be the bad guy for not wanting to share. And the more I resisted, the more they pushed. Looking back, I realized that was the beginning of the nightmare. I thought I'd earned a vacation for myself, but to them, my sacrifices didn't mean anything. It was just another opportunity for Emily to shine, and for me to play the supporting role. I didn't know it then, but my so-called dream vacation was about to turn into a battle. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't planning on backing down. Emily called me a few days later, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. She didn't waste time before saying, "You know, it's kind of selfish to go all the way to Hawaii by yourself. The kids deserve a vacation more than anyone." I almost dropped the phone. She made it sound like I had done something wrong just for wanting time alone. I tried to stay calm and told her, "Emily, this is my trip. I've been saving for years. I planned it for myself." That didn't matter. She launched into a speech about how hard motherhood was, how her kids needed to see the world, and how I wouldn't understand because I didn't have children. I bit my tongue, but my chest burned. I knew where this was going. A couple of hours later, my mom called. She repeated Emily's words almost word for word, saying, "Family comes first. You'll have more fun with them there. Don't be selfish." I could feel my jaw clench. For once, I said no firmly. I told her it wasn't up for discussion. But it didn't stop there. What I didn't know was that Emily and my mom had already started making calls. They looked at flights, checked hotel availability, and even started planning activities. They talked as if I had already agreed, and I wasn't even in the loop. One evening, I got a text from my mom saying, "We found a better hotel for all of us, closer to kid-friendly attractions. You should switch your reservation." I replied right away, "I already booked my hotel. I'm not changing it." Minutes later, Emily texted me herself, "Come on, Rachel, don't be difficult. This way everyone will have fun together. It's not a big deal." I refused again, but the pressure didn't let up. My dad called trying to play peacemaker, saying it would mean a lot to the family if I just compromised. Every call left me feeling like the walls were closing in. By the time I finally checked my email and looked at the details of my trip, my stomach turned. Emily and my mom had made changes behind my back. My single-room reservation had been swapped for a larger suite that could fit everyone comfortably. My original plans, quiet beaches, a spa package, even a snorkeling tour, were gone. Instead, the itinerary was filled with kid-friendly excursions and family dinners. And then came the worst part. The new bill had my name on it. The extra costs had been charged to my card. Somehow, while pretending it was all about family, They made sure I was the one paying. I sat staring at the numbers, hands shaking. My dream had been stolen right in front of me, and I hadn't even seen it happening. They turned my escape into their playground, and I was expected to smile and foot the bill. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, realizing my solo trip was gone. What I had now was a so-called family vacation, and I hadn't agreed to any of it. The moment we arrived at the hotel, Emily started with her demands. She stood in the lobby, arms crossed, and said the suite wasn't big enough. The kids need their own space, she insisted, as if the room was hers to critique. The front desk clerk looked uncomfortable while my mom nodded along, and before I could stop it, another adjoining room was added, under my account. I opened my mouth to argue, but my dad gave me that look, the one that always means don't make a scene. I felt my chest tighten as I handed over my card again. It was like watching money drain out of my future in real time. I tried pointing out that it wasn't fair for me to cover everything, but my parents jumped in immediately. My mom's voice was sharp. Don't be ungrateful. We're all here together because of you. My dad added, you're acting selfish, Rachel. Family means compromise. Selfish. That word landed like a punch. I had spent years working double shifts, putting off everything I wanted, and suddenly I was the villain because I didn't want to pay for Emily's comfort. I swallowed the anger burning in my throat. Fighting now wouldn't get me anywhere. Later that afternoon, while unpacking, I heard a crash in the next room. Emily's kids had gotten into my things. My wide-brimmed hat, the one I had splurged on just for this trip, was bent and crushed on the carpet. One of them had grabbed my sunglasses and snapped an arm clean off. I picked up the pieces, my hands shaking. Emily brushed it off with a laugh, saying, they're just kids, Rachel. Relax. You can always buy another pair. I wanted to scream. Instead, I pressed my lips together and said nothing. My mom chimed in, telling me to be understanding. Understanding? I was the one who had saved and planned, and yet every bit of joy was being chipped away. The days blurred into a pattern of demands and disappointment. Every time I tried to step aside, someone pulled me back in. Meals had to be adjusted to suit the kids' picky appetites, activities canceled if they weren't interested, and somehow I was expected to pick up the slack without a complaint. I could feel exhaustion settling in, the kind that seeps into your bone. But while I smiled tightly and kept my voice calm, my mind was racing. Every unfair charge, every broken item, every sharp word, I logged it away. I stopped reacting, stopped showing them the sting of their jabs. On the surface, I looked like I was letting things slide, but inside I was building a ledger. I lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling, the sound of the ocean outside mocking what this trip was supposed to be. My heart pounded with frustration, but under it, a new thought began to form. I wasn't powerless. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I wasn't going to let them leave this trip thinking I was their doormat. I wouldn't explode or throw a fit. That's what they'd expect. No, I was going to bide my time. Every sigh, every dismissive comment, every swipe of my card was fuel. And with each moment, I felt myself inching closer to something I hadn't felt in a long time: resolve. From the very first morning, Emily and Tyler behaved as if the entire trip had been arranged for them. They marched up to the front desk, browsed through brochures, and announced plans for the day without so much as glancing in my direction. Boat rides, zoo visits, shopping trips. They picked everything, then expected me to tag along like an afterthought. When I hesitated, Emily waved her hand dismissively and said, "We'll all have more fun this way." Tyler grinned, adding, "Yeah, no one wants to sit around doing nothing." It was as if my voice didn't exist. At every turn, I was reminded where I stood in this family. My parents gushed about Emily's parenting, how patient she was, how well she handled 2 children in a busy place. My mom kept whispering that Emily was a natural, and that I should learn from her example. My dad nodded, throwing in comments like, "See, this is why Emily's such a blessing." Meanwhile, I carried bags, held jackets, and tried to stay invisible, because arguing would only invite more scolding. The comparisons never stopped. If I ordered something small at lunch, my mom would say, "See how Emily balances everything? That's why she has it all together." If I stayed quiet during conversations, my dad would remark, "You should try being more like your sister, she's confident." Every word chipped away at me, leaving me smaller and smaller until I barely recognized myself. The breaking point came during dinner at a seaside restaurant. The air smelled of grilled fish and salt, and the sun was sinking into the water, painting the sky pink. For one brief moment, I thought maybe I could enjoy the evening. Then Emily raised her glass, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Honestly, I don't know what we'd do without Rachel. She's basically a free babysitter we brought along." Tyler laughed, clinking his glass with hers, and even my parents chuckled. Heat rushed up my neck. My hands trembled under the table as I tried to keep my expression neutral. Inside, though, something cracked wide open. I looked at Emily's smug face, the sparkle in her eyes, and realized she wasn't joking, she meant it. To her, I wasn't a sister, or even a person with dreams of my own. I was a tool, useful only when serving her needs. The laughter around me blurred into noise. I forced myself to eat in silence, tasting nothing, feeling like the walls of that restaurant were closing in. Every detail of the evening etched itself into my mind. The clink of silverware, the sticky feel of the table under my palms, the sharp tang of humiliation in my throat. My dream had curdled into something ugly, a trip where I was erased, mocked, and used. Back in my room later that night, I closed the door gently and leaned against it. The muffled sound of Emily's children screaming down the hall seeped through the walls, but I tuned it out. I sat on the bed, staring at the floor, breathing slow and steady until the fury in my chest cooled into something sharper. They thought I was weak. They thought I would swallow insult after insult and carry the weight of their choices without protest. For years, I had played that part, nodding, agreeing, letting myself be pushed into the shadows. But not anymore. As the waves outside pounded the shore, I made a quiet promise to myself. This was the last time they would laugh at me like that. The morning after that dinner, I woke up with a different mindset. I forced a smile at breakfast, nodding along to Emily's chatter, answering my mom's questions politely, even agreeing with my dad when he suggested another packed day. On the surface, I looked calm, cooperative, and willing. Inside, though, I had flipped a switch. If they wanted me quiet and compliant, fine, I could give them that. But it wouldn't be on their terms anymore. When Emily rattled off the day's agenda, I listened and smiled, but I didn't argue. Instead of resisting, I played along, acting as if I had accepted my role. Tyler seemed smug, convinced I had finally come around. No one noticed that while I nodded, I was already planning something entirely different. The next day, while they were getting the kids ready for a crowded outing, I slipped out early. My bag was already packed with what I needed. I left without explanation and took a cab straight to the harbor, where I boarded a small boat headed out for a snorkeling trip. As the ocean spread around me in endless blue, I felt the tension ease from my body for the first time since we'd arrived. No one nagging, no one pointing, no one demanding, just silence and the salt air. By the time I returned, sun-warmed and smiling, the hotel room was chaotic. Toys scattered across the floor, Emily pacing with a screaming child on her hip, my mom muttering about how stressful the day had been. Emily looked up at me, eyes narrowing. "Where were you?" she asked. I shrugged lightly. "Just out." Then I walked into my room and closed the door. The next day, I repeated it. They were headed to a zoo, dragging strollers and diaper bags. I claimed I wasn't feeling well, then slipped away to a spa downtown. I sank into warm water, sipped cold juice, and let strangers pamper me while my family trudged through heat and crowds. When I came back glowing and refreshed, Emily's glare could have cut glass. I didn't explain myself. I didn't need to. Every time they tried to rope me into babysitting or hauling bags, I had somewhere else to be. I let Emily juggle tantrums and meltdowns, let my parents carry bags, let Tyler chase after his kids. I stayed polite, even cheerful, but unavailable. It didn't take long before they noticed the shift. Emily began calling me unreliable, under her breath, but there was an edge of desperation in her voice. My mom tried to guilt-trip me with sighs and pointed comments like, "Some of us are really exhausted." My dad asked if I couldn't pitch in just a little. I smiled each time, offered vague answers, then slipped away again. What they hadn't expected was that I knew how to disappear without making a scene. I didn't fight. I didn't argue. I simply stopped being useful. And the less I gave, the more they scrambled. For once, the weight was on their shoulders, not mine. One evening, when I returned from a sunset cruise, I found them all slumped in the suite, drained and irritable. Emily's hair was messy, her kids were overtired, and my parents looked worn down. For the first time, they weren't laughing at my expense. They weren't mocking or dismissing me. They were just struggling. And I stood in the doorway, smiling politely, saying nothing, while inside I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, control. The next morning, I joined them for breakfast with a calm smile, sipping my coffee while Emily wrestled her son into a chair. She asked if I could just keep an eye on him for a second. I leaned back and said, "You're their mom, not me," echoing the exact words she'd once thrown at me. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Later, we went down to the pool. The kids splashed wildly, throwing water everywhere, while Emily tried to keep control. At one point, her youngest began crying because he didn't want to wear floaties. She looked at me, eyes pleading. "Can you hold him for a bit so I can deal with his sister?" she asked, voice already strained. I adjusted my sunglasses, leaned back in my chair, and replied casually, "Sorry, I'm just enjoying my vacation." My mom gasped like I'd committed a crime. "Rachel, don't be so cold." My dad muttered something about family obligations. I kept my smile steady and said, I'm not being cold. I'm simply relaxing. Then I stretched out on the lounge chair and let the sun warm my skin, refusing to budge. As the hours passed, the scene only grew more chaotic. Emily's daughter shrieked when she dropped her ice cream, and her son threw a tantrum when he couldn't find his toy. Tyler paced back and forth, snapping at Emily. My parents tried to soothe everyone, but nothing worked. I stayed put, flipping through a magazine, pretending I didn't notice the chaos swirling around me. At one point, Emily marched over, dripping wet and furious. "You could at least help a little," she hissed. I lowered the magazine slowly, met her glare, and repeated, "You're their mom, not me." Then I went back to reading. The look on her face was priceless: anger, disbelief, and just a hint of panic. The more I refused, the more the cracks showed. The kids whined about being bored, complained about the heat, and demanded snacks constantly. Emily's tone grew sharper, her patience thinner. My mom kept insisting I step up, but every time, I responded with the same calm line. "I'm enjoying my vacation." By the third repetition, even my dad stopped pushing, realizing I wasn't going to cave. That evening, when we all went out to a crowded shopping district, the same pattern repeated itself. The kids darted between stalls, tugging at Emily's arms, begging for toys she couldn't afford. She looked like she was about to explode, hair sticking to her forehead, voice rising in frustration. She glanced at me again, but I only adjusted the strap of my bag and walked a little ahead, letting her handle the meltdown. The longer this went on, the more satisfaction I felt. I didn't need to yell or confront anyone. All I had to do was stand back and let natural consequences fall where they belong. Emily had always believed I'd carry the weight without question, but now she was struggling under it alone. By the time we got back to the hotel that night, Emily was frazzled, Tyler was grumbling under his breath, and my parents looked exhausted. I, on the other hand, felt lighter than I had in days. Watching them unravel gave me a quiet, steady thrill. For once, the burden wasn't mine, and I wasn't about to take it back. The tension that had been simmering finally boiled over one evening. We had just returned from another long day, and everyone was wound tight. Emily cornered me in the suite's living area, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're ruining this trip, Rachel," she snapped, hands on her hips. "You've been nothing but distant, and it's making everything harder for everyone." I set down the drink in my hand and looked straight at her. "Funny," I said evenly, "because last I checked, I'm the one who paid for most of this. And it was supposed to be my vacation to begin with." Her face flushed, and before she could speak, my mom jumped in. "Rachel, don't start. You know Emily has been doing her best to keep things organized." My dad added, "You should be more cooperative instead of acting like a guest." The irony made me laugh under my breath. "A guest? That's rich. I'm the only reason this trip is even happening." Emily's voice rose to a shriek. "There it is. That attitude. You think money gives you the right to act superior. No wonder you're alone. You'll die that way because you're too selfish to ever have a family of your own." The words hit hard, but instead of shrinking back like I usually did, something in me snapped. Years of biting my tongue, of watching her be praised while I was pushed aside, came flooding out. My voice shook at first, but grew steadier with every word. "You want to talk about selfish? Let's talk about how every milestone in your life has been handed to you while I stood in the background. Mom and Dad paid for your wedding, babysat your kids, sang your praises. And me? I've worked myself to exhaustion, and still I'm expected to clean up your messes. Every time you make a mistake, I'm the one who gets guilt into fixing it. That's not family, that's exploitation." The room fell silent. Emily's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My parents stared like they'd never seen me before. I pressed on, refusing to lose the momentum. "You hijacked something that belonged to me. You didn't ask, you didn't respect my boundaries. You just assumed I'd roll over like always. And now, because I won't bow down, I'm the villain? No, not this time." Emily's eyes glittered with fury, but I saw something else too: uncertainty. My mom tried to scold me again, but I held up my hand. "No. You don't get to tell me I'm ungrateful when all I've done is give. You don't get to call me selfish when I've spent years sacrificing. And you definitely don't get to compare me to Emily like I'm somehow less worthy. I'm done playing that part." For the first time in my life, I didn't back down. My voice filled the room, steady and unshakable. Emily glared, my parents fumed, but I stood there without flinching. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the muffled sound of the ocean outside. Something had shifted. They could see it in my eyes. I wasn't the same Rachel who had always taken the blame, who had always carried the weight. I wasn't going to fold this time. The morning after that blow-up, I kept my door closed while the others shuffled around the suite. I heard the muffled sounds of Emily's kids whining and my parents' voices trying to keep the peace. But I didn't step out. When they left for breakfast, I waited until the hallway was quiet, then slipped out on my own. I walked down the street to a small cafe overlooking the water and finally ate a meal in peace. No interruptions, no jabs, no demands, just me, hot coffee, and the ocean breeze. From then on, I stopped making myself available. When my family headed to crowded attractions, I went the opposite direction. I lounged on the beach with a book, strolled through markets at my own pace, and took long walks without being rushed. I treated myself to fresh seafood, long swims, and even a massage appointment I had secretly booked. For the first time since arriving, I felt like I was actually living the vacation I had imagined. Meanwhile, the cracks in their routine grew wider. I'd return to the suite in the evenings to find Emily drained, her hair frizzy, her voice sharp as she tried to wrangle her kids. Tyler paced in frustration, muttering under his breath, while my parents tried to distract the little ones with game. It was obvious none of them were having an easy time. One afternoon, I came back from a glass-bottom boat ride to find my mom sitting on the couch with Emily's youngest sprawled across her lap, screaming over a lost toy. My dad was bent over, digging through luggage, while Emily stormed around snapping at Tyler. Nobody even noticed when I walked in. I slipped into my room, smiling quietly to myself. Every day, the same pattern repeated. They struggled through outings, and I disappeared into my own plan. When we crossed paths, my parents gave me looks that hovered between disappointment and fatigue, but I didn't waver. I ate separately, spent my days exactly how I wanted, and let them manage on their own. At first, Emily tried to bark orders at me like before. She'd say things like, "Rachel, can you just take him for a second?" Or, "Don't you want to help us out?" Each time, I simply walked past without responding. Eventually, the demands faded into muttering, and then into silence. The shift became undeniable. My parents' faces looked older by the day, their patience wearing thin. Emily's usual confidence cracked, replaced by constant irritation. Tyler looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Without me carrying the load, the entire dynamic fell apart. For years, they had leaned on me like it was natural, like it was owed. But as the days passed, the absence of my cooperation exposed just how dependent they had been. They weren't used to handling the hard parts without me smoothing everything over, and it showed. I didn't feel guilty. Not once. Sitting on a quiet stretch of sand one evening, watching the sun melt into the horizon, I realized how freeing it felt to put myself first. Their struggles were not my responsibility, and the more they floundered, the more I understood that stepping back wasn't cruel. It was necessary. By the end of that week, their laughter was gone, replaced with bickering and tired sighs. I, on the other hand, felt lighter than I had in years. On one of the final mornings, I was sitting on the balcony with a cup of coffee, the breeze carrying in the sound of the waves, when Emily knocked lightly and let herself in. She stood there with that practiced look of desperation, her kids already squabbling in the hallway. "Can you just take them for a little while?" she asked, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "It's the last day, Rachel. Just this once. Please." I didn't flinch. I set my cup down, met her eyes, and said, "No." Her mouth opened in shock, as though she couldn't process the word. "It's not that hard," she tried again, her voice sharper this time. "You could make things so much easier for everyone if you'd stop being difficult." I stood, keeping my tone calm and steady. "You've had this entire trip to see how much I usually do for all of you. I'm not your safety net anymore. Not here, not at home, not ever again." The silence that followed was heavier than anything we'd experienced all. Emily blinked at me, her face red, searching for words. When none came, she stormed out, muttering under her breath. Minutes later, my parents appeared, clearly having been sent in as reinforcements. My mom's voice wavered between pleading and scolding. "Rachel, it wouldn't kill you to lend a hand. She's your sister." My dad crossed his arms, adding, "You're being stubborn just to prove a point." I shook my head slowly. "No, I'm setting a boundary. For years, I've been treated like I don't matter, except for what I can provide. That ends now. I won't let you guilt me back into a role I never agreed to." They both stared at me as though I'd grown into someone they didn't recognize. My mom's lips parted, ready to argue, but she stopped. My dad turned away, his jaw tight. For the first time, they had no comeback, no lecture, no quick dismissal. The rest of the day passed in uneasy quiet. Emily sulked, Tyler avoided eye contact, and my parents kept their distance. I, on the other hand, spent those hours exactly how I wanted, walking along the beach barefoot, savoring the salty air, eating at a small oceanside shack, and watching the sun sink into the horizon without anyone demanding my attention. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. While they stewed in their frustration, I felt freer than I had in years. Every step I took on my own terms was a reminder that I had finally taken control. On the last evening, I returned to the suite to find them all slumped on the couches, drained and silent. Nobody asked where I'd been, and I didn't offer an explanation. I simply packed my things with a quiet sense of finality. As I zipped my bag, I realized the shift wasn't just about this trip. It was bigger. I had drawn a line that would carry over into the rest of my life. They could be stunned, they could be angry, but the message was clear. I was done being the doormat. That night, I fell asleep listening to the waves, knowing I'd finally reclaimed something more important than a vacation. I'd reclaimed myself. When we returned home, the tension that had been hanging in the air during the last days of the trip didn't magically disappear. My parents acted as though nothing had happened. They smiled stiffly, asked about my work schedule, and spoke of the vacation as if it had been some perfect family memory. Emily tried to spin the whole ordeal into her usual narrative, laughing about the adventures with the kids, and how everyone had such a great time together. I sat through their words quietly, but I knew better. The moment we unpacked our bags, I decided there would be no slipping back into old habits. Within a week, my mom called asking if I could babysit, just for a few hours so Emily could rest. Normally, I would have hesitated before giving in. This time I said firmly, "No, I'm busy." There was silence on the other end of the line before she sputtered. "But it's only for a little while," I repeated. No, the call ended quickly after that. Not long after, Emily called herself, this time about money. She hinted that Tyler's hours had been cut at work, and they were struggling. I didn't even let her finish. "I can't help you," I said simply. Her shocked pause told me she hadn't expected me to stand so firm. When she tried to guilt me by saying, "Family takes care of each other," I replied, "Exactly. And I've been the only one doing that for years. I'm done." I hung up before she could continue. The pattern continued. Every time a request came, I refused without explanation, without apology. No babysitting, no loans, no dropping everything to clean up their chaos. Each no felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. My parents seemed bewildered. My mom accused me of being cold, while my dad muttered about me changing. They didn't understand that it wasn't a change. It was me finally showing them who I had always been, without the burden they had piled on me. Their disappointment didn't shake me. If anything, it proved how much they had come to rely on my silence. Emily, of course, took it the hardest. She alternated between anger and disbelief, unable to process that her control was gone. For years, she had leaned on me as if I owed her my time and money, and now she was left to handle her own responsibilities. Watching her scramble from a distance felt like justice, not cruelty. As weeks turned into months, my life began to feel different. I had time to breathe, to rest, to make choices without second-guessing whether they would please anyone else. I booked another trip, this time without telling anyone until I was already gone. Sitting alone on a quiet beach, I realized the truth. I hadn't just taken back my vacation, I had taken back my life. Betrayal had forced me to see the truth. For too long, I believed keeping the peace meant sacrificing myself. But standing up, saying no, and refusing to bend showed me I was stronger than I had ever given myself credit for. My family may never change. Emily will likely always believe the world revolves around her, and my parents will probably keep treating her like she's special. But I don't have to play the part they wrote for me. I get to write my own story now, and for the first time I feel free. Do you think I was right to finally walk away from their constant demands, or should I have given them one more chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.